So we were able to feed that to our system. And now literally like that 6 months happens in about 16 minutes of compute time on my server. When we can crack using machine learning and artificial intelligence to do good things that are otherwise really hard to get people to do well, everyone can benefit because of that. The sky is becoming the limit of what the applications of that can be, but that is a long journey to be able to do that well. It's not a simple thing. And when you bring the data sovereignty, privacy stuff into it, it gets even more complicated.
Welcome to Artificial Insights, where we talk to leaders and thinkers in AI about how to do AI right. I'm your host, Daniel Maneri, and this is Season 4. We sit down every other Friday with people who build things with and write things about AI and talk to them about what they do and why they do it. Today, I'm joined by Josh Müller. Josh is one of the directors at Waha, a tech nonprofit focused on making the Great Commission easy to understand and actionable for all Christian believers. He's a Canadian married to a Colombian who both lived in the Middle East for about 9 years. Josh's goal is to make the world a better place by building projects that bring restoration. And at Waha, he gets the chance to experiment with all sorts of ways that AI can make the world a better place. Josh, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Josh Müller. I am one of the directors at a tech nonprofit called Waha. Waha makes an app and curriculum that makes understanding and obeying the Great Commission easy and simple. So my main responsibility is getting the app into new languages. We're at about 43 right now. We're trying to get to 100 by the end of next year. And so kind of making all the wheels turn for that is my main responsibility. But then I also have other things I'm working on within the organization, including trying to figure out, bringing AI automation to all parts of the organization where appropriate to make things work better and work simpler. So like one example, because we're a Bible study app in so many languages, we need permission to use Bibles in all those languages that we use it in. Most Bibles, like you're not allowed to just freely use it in a product. You need to seek written permission to do it. And so one of the things is like getting AI tools set up to make managing that whole process easier. Or like when we have new people come in to like either download the app or come to our website, making the administrative process of managing that simpler as well. So a lot of different plates that spin with that, but kind of languages, AI, and innovation is the main pots that I have my hand in within current organization.
And before I ask you how you guys are accomplishing that, there's a question that I think is on everyone's mind with a podcast like this, which is, are you an AI?
Am I an AI? I am not. I do type with M dashes, but I was doing that before ChatGPT was shipped, so that's a thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's almost impossible to get ChatGPT not to, but they're super useful.
I've never tried. I kind of like whatever few signatures that we have of, okay, this is a human typing, this is a large language model typing. But the unfortunate thing is some of the things that AI has learned is the way that I do things. So I'm like, do I change how I type? I don't know yet. But yeah, I have M dashes in my blog going back to 2020. So
Wow.
Yeah.
OG. And
I was using M dashes before it was cool.
what got you into AI?
Oof, that's a good question. I feel like everyone's kind of into AI in one way or another right now. And so there's the, hey, we're just trying to get by in the tech world and that's the way that things work now answer. A more, let's say, more specific answer is one of the workflows that we have in our organization is, so like I already explained with our Bible studies, we have a chunk of questions and then a chunk of scripture and then a chunk of questions again. And when I first started doing stuff with Waha back in 2019, the way that we put that all together is we'd open up an audio editor like Audacity and we'd grab the question and put the question in and then we'd figure out where the scripture starts. I'm like, okay, this one starts at Exodus 2:7 and ends at Exodus 2:17. So I got to go in and find where that is and copy and paste it and put it over. And then, okay, this lesson has 2 scriptures. And so like back in the day, our curriculum took about like 6 months just of audio editing to be able to ship, let alone all the extra stuff like translation and recording and everything else that happened. Just the audio editing alone, we figured took about 6 months to ship a full curriculum. And at the time I thought, wow, this is awful. This is not fun to spend so much time editing audio files. And so I like officially joined the team back, I want to say, 2021 or so. Yeah, probably towards the end of 2021. And I kind of just had this realization one day that if we could figure out where verses start and end, we could actually basically automatically do all that editing. We could use, there's this tool called FFmpeg. We could write these crazy FFmpeg scripts that would stitch everything together at once. I threw together a prototype of it, like manually setting those timestamps myself. And then we tried it out, and basically in 10 minutes of compute time was able to do something that would have otherwise taken about a month of audio editing. And so it was like, that kind of got me intrigued. And then as we like kept exploring and kept learning, we learned about this technique within AI that like basically you can give a text and an audio to a model and it will spit out those timestamps. And so that was kind of like the last piece we needed to like automate that process as much as possible. So we learned about Meta has this model called MMS. I think it's massively multilingual speech. And it has a feature called forced alignment where basically you can feed it a text and an audio and it will spit out the timestamps of the different segments within that audio. So we were able to feed that to our system. And now literally like that 6 months happens in about 16 minutes of compute time on my server. And so yeah, that was kind of like the first real dive into really useful, applicable AI that like has really solid kingdom impact. It meant that we didn't need volunteers to do that work for 6 months. Like that just happens with bits and bytes on my GPU now. And now that's 6 months extra of a disciple maker's life that they can go and actually make disciples. And once we get the tool shipped in their language, they're able to go and start making disciples instead of audio editing. So yeah, that was kind of the start of like, oh man, when we can crack using machine learning and artificial intelligence to do good things that are otherwise really hard to get people to do well, everyone can benefit because of that. It's not a given, but it got us excited about that. And then from there, as LLMs have become ubiquitous and everything else, I've been learning about agents and like basically having agents running almost every day at some point in my personal workflows, and then trying to set those up organizationally. Just kind of scales from there. But the forced alignment with those tools was the first place that it was like, oh, this is valuable and this is important for kingdom people to, be interfacing with and working alongside.
Yeah, and it sounds like that was something that was driven by necessity, where you said 6 months of manual effort was 16 minutes.
Roughly, yeah. Depends on my internet connection in a given day. It might be closer to 45 minutes of compute time, but again, like that's a workable comparison.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing ratio, and that's time that somebody has to spend like listening to an audio file, looking at a text, and then just picking timestamps so you can stitch them together. Now you do that automatically.
Yeah.
Is there anything more about how you did that that's really neat to you? Because it sounds like something that is a pretty niche use case that I've never heard of before.
Interesting, yeah. So I'll go two different directions, the different use cases, in case I forget that. Let me come back to that. But as far as interesting things regarding that process, one of the things that I keep coming back to is, and this isn't like necessarily about AI, but I think it is about human nature and human well-being. The idea for that dropped when I was reading my Bible one morning. And so like I had already gone through this process with one language, and I was like one of the primary editors of getting these files done. And I was just reading my Bible one morning. I want to say it was like in the Psalms or something. And I had the YouVersion app open, and they have a feature where you can, like when you play the audio Bible, it'll just highlight the verse that you're reading at any given time. And I'm going through and enjoying my time with the Lord, like being purposeful. I won't even say it was a Saturday, I can't remember, but like resting and just being at peace with the Lord and stuff. And then like out of nowhere, this idea drops of like, oh wait, these guys are able to highlight each verse at a time as an audio Bible is playing. That means they know exactly where each verse starts and ends. And if we knew where each verse could start and end, then like just all the pieces come into place.
Wow.
And so the main revelation to be able to make that work happened at a time of like restfulness and peace for me. And I think that's kind of like an idea and revelation that I keep coming back to, is this idea of like, we're like, humans are at their best when they can have time to breathe and have time to let their minds be creative, have time to like, not be grinding all the time, not be just constantly treading water and trying to get by, but like having some time to let your mind do what God created it to do, which is come up with ideas to bring restoration, to bring life to the world around us. I see that as super important. And honestly, like one of the things that excites me about the AI revolution is if it's applied right, it can free up our time to be more kingdom creative. And that seems awesome to me.
100%. Yeah.
But then, other applications. That was the other direction I was going to go. YouVersion is a case example of that. Is if you're listening to an audio Bible, being able to highlight the text that's being used, super valuable. We're in conversation with a few organizations that are doing oral Bibles. So Bibles that don't have any text because the group, like language group that it's for, don't have a written form.
Wow.
And they've been really purposeful to like basically tag their audios with verses as well, because if you can do that, then you can interface with those much more applicably and purposefully than you'd be able to otherwise. So it's okay. Like I know somewhere in here, like this is John 3, somewhere in here is John 3:16. If you can know where that is, then you can adapt interfaces accordingly to help people interface with that better. So it is a very niche problem, but it's one that like shows up in a surprising number of places.
And you gave us a blurb about Waha, but could you tell us a little bit more about what they do and maybe even how you got to be involved with them in the first place?
Yeah, so Waha, the idea for Waha originally came from some stuff that was being done in North Africa. There was this team that was basically using social media ads to try and find people who were interested in the Bible. And so they were sending out these Jesus-themed ads on Facebook and different platforms. And what ended up happening was it kind of triggered a Bible shortage in the country where this was happening. And so some people connected with this team actually ended up going out of country and coming back in, and they were coming back in with a suitcase full of Bibles and almost got caught as they were doing it, and it was nearly really bad. But then this team and some other groups that were associated with it were kind of talking about, hey, what we're doing the most helpful thing to be doing right now? And it kind of sent them into a deep time of prayer, and basically some of these guys ended up learning about and interfacing with some leaders of this idea called disciple-making movements. And so disciple-making movements is kind of this methodology of doing ministry that has been extremely fruitful in some of the most unreached and unengaged parts of the world, to the point where entire regions would have no Christians whatsoever. And then 10 years later, you're talking like millions or more people who have come to faith.
Wow.
And so some of these guys were interfacing with a few leaders within this movement space, and basically said, hey, this discovery Bible study methodology is proving to be like extremely kingdom fruitful, extremely effective in some of like the hardest to reach parts of the world. It would be awesome if there was a tool to be able to do that better. And just so happened at this time, there was a guy who was visiting he had just finished his computer science degree and was, basically visiting this group. And they're like, hey, why don't we build an app? And it originally just started as a side project. Hey, let's see what could happen. And then when the app got built, some people found out about it and they're like, this is awesome. I want it in my language. And so they're like, okay, let's start seeing what can happen to get this into more languages. And 43 languages later, we just became a dedicated nonprofit. We were under a church like a separate church charity for the longest time, but just a few weeks ago, we became our own nonprofit. And
nice.
The whole idea is to equip people around the world, among the unchurched and among the unreached, to make disciples, and to make disciples that make disciples. So it's super simple methodology, something that you could teach a 5-year-old to do in 60 seconds, but something that is like really fruitful and is like spreading virally in a lot of places in the world. So.
And that started because it's an easy way to get a Bible across a border with a digital method instead of having to smuggle one in potentially. And wow, now it's in 43 languages.
43 languages, and I think we're about to hit our 60,000th lesson total across 170 countries. So.
Wow. And is that 60,000 lessons that are available to use, or is that 60,000 sessions?
60,000 like groups having met and done a lesson. Each lesson or each language has about 500 lessons available to it. So if a group decided to go through and do every lesson, that's about 9 years worth of content for them to be able to go through.
Wow.
Nine and a half, something like that. But yeah, so metrics wise, we've logged 60,000 instances of someone opening their phone and going through the entirety of the lesson and like being in that lesson for, I think it's like at least 15 minutes. So the expectation is the vast majority of those times it's between 3 and 6 people that are actually in those groups because it's designed to be a group-based methodology. So you can do the math from there. 60,000 times 6 is 360,000 instances of scripture engagement within that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah.
And given that this is probably something where it's intended to be anonymous, there probably aren't user accounts behind it. How
Correct,
do
yeah.
you track all of that?
So pseudonymous analytics, whenever you like open up your phone, you get a unique identifier that isn't connected to your name, isn't connected to anything else, but is just like, this is a random set of characters that identifies this app installation on this phone. And so we can see if someone has installed their app, if someone's installation on their phone has done 20 lessons, but we don't know who that is. We know like roughly they're in kind of this area of the world, but we have no GPS data. We have no name or email address unless they specifically give it to us. But yeah, in the vast majority of cases, we can see that God is doing really cool stuff, but we don't know what's happening or who it is or anything like that. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like quite the challenge, both on the privacy side and on knowing just the right amount to be able to help.
Yeah, that is one of our like constant things that we hold in tension is we want to enable maximum privacy and maximum security because so many of our users are in really challenging, really sketchy contexts. But then, yeah, we also we need some data so that we can make decisions to make the app better and equip people better, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned that Waha just became its own nonprofit recently.
Yeah.
What was this decision like or that journey like?
Yeah, the decision was basically we've grown beyond it making sense for us to be a subset of an organization, and it made more sense as far as even just like organizationally being able to have the proper communication that needed to happen. There was like a list of reasons that made it make sense just in this specific context. The process was long and complicated. Setting up any organization can be a little nebulous and complicated, but a charity has like all of that and then like several layers of complexity on top of that. Yeah. So it's been a journey. It's been a process. I think we started it back in November, and I think we only finally got our organizational stuff in place to be able to migrate all of our Bible licenses like 3 weeks ago. Oh. So it's been a long process.
Yeah, fair enough. Like this licensing is quite a big deal with what you're doing.
Yeah. I think we have about 56 license agreements right now. And for each of those, we're needing to go back and say, hey, we're actually a new organization. And like we basically need this new version of this signed that says we're this organization now and not that organization that we were. And so it's literally going to be like a several months process for our licensing coordinator to go through and make that happen. So, yeah.
Oh, man. You mentioned that there were other ways that AI is helpful at Waha.
Yeah.
Could you give us a few examples of how you're using it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, you could probably like talk for an hour about all the different ways and then all the different details. One example that comes to mind recently is like in this process of migrating all of our Bible licenses over, we've set up a new management system for us to be able to do that. And we needed to figure out how to integrate that with our CRM because all of our communications and stuff is managed through our CRM. And so like the normal way to do that would have been like for each, we use Coda, which is kind of like a Google Docs and Sheets and Notion kind of all mixed together into one. And so we have all of our licenses managed there. And we wanted a way such that for each license, we could click and see like the organization entry in the CRM to do that. And we have dozens and dozens of these. So one way to do that would have been like someone going through, searching the CRM, finding the organization, grabbing the URL for that, adding it to the entry, and then going on to the next one and doing that over and over again for the dozens and dozens of licenses that we have. But instead of that, I was able to throw together an automation with N8N. It's a like low-code automation platform that has like really solid AI tooling within it. And basically, I was able to set up this automation that was like, it went through every field and then just did that search automatically. I hooked up like a search tool that integrated with our CRM and then basically prompted the agent to be like, hey, here's the organization. Check if it's in there. If it's not, try a few other options. Like if it's not, maybe Wycliffe was spelt wrong. So try like other ways that it could be spelt or something like that. If you try 5 different times, then just skip on to the next one kind of thing. And then I was able to run that. And basically that job that would have taken like a chunk of time to do. It was a simple job, but would have taken a while to do. I was able to do when my agent did when I went and did dishes and was preparing a meal, So that's one example. Another, the last 2-3 weeks or so, I've been working a lot with some of those agentic coders. So Claude Code is like one of those tools. Gemini CLI is another. And then Qwen just released one as well. Qwen has a super generous free tier right now. And so I've been using it as the primary one, and it's been like completely free. And you can just, if you have a code base, or I've been using it to work with and interface with CSV or JSON files, you can just say in plain English, hey, I need this to happen to this file, and I need it to look like this instead. Can you do it? And it'll think through all the stuff that needs to happen, and 45 minutes later or 5 minutes later, depending on the complexity of the task, will be completed. And so getting a ton of value from that, especially being able to run like a few of them in parallel. It's okay, this one's doing this task, this one's doing this task. So that's more like personally, not necessarily organizationally, but like I think that's probably been able to increase my productivity on those things, 3x, 4x, because it's doing stuff while I'm doing other stuff. Another one is like we have this big data set that we've been working through to kind of be thinking through stuff with fundraising and those kinds of things. And we had some ideas for approaching it, but we realized that we could actually take this entire data set, feed it through a local LLM model, and like for each instance of data, get it to process and give recommendations about it. And so I think we had, I want to say thousands of data points that we needed to think through and process. And I was able to put it on my server, and a few hours later, it came back with all the answers to the questions that we were trying to think through, So right now I feel like there's a lot of smaller instances that this has brought us a lot of quality of life and work productivity improvements. But yeah.
And for that last one, what was the need that you were trying to meet by doing it?
Yeah, so ultimately the simplest version of the need was that we had this massive data set. I won't necessarily go too into the details of what the data set was, but it was much bigger than even we could think about organizing an army of outsourcers to be able to think through. But with some purposeful filtering, and then with just some prompting and a tool put together with Gemini CLI, it turned into something that we never could have imagined actually working our way through the data before. But then it became something that with a few hours of compute time, we had actionable information that we could work off of afterwards,
I guess I was trying to think about, is that the kind of thing that would be useful if you had questions about all of your donors?
Yeah, so in the case of what we were working through, it was thousands of XML files that had a lot of data and information in each of them, and we wanted to process and pull actionable information out of each of those XML files. Because of our complex balance with collecting data, we don't currently have a ton of actionable or really even a ton of data on our users, on our donors, those kinds of things. I think if we had a way that we were collecting data in massive nets, it would definitely help us to be able to process that data and act on it. And we are trying to figure out how to gather the right amount of information while still maximizing privacy, and then take action on that right amount of information. And AI is definitely going to play into that as we explore it. And especially if we can figure out how to do it with local models that aren't based off of services that are scraping data and that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely the capacity to interact with and interface with data feels like no other time in history,
Yeah. And how would you put that to someone who hasn't started playing with it yet and hasn't started thinking about what's possible? How would you encourage them to start thinking about their data?
Yeah, that's a big question. I feel like I'm trying to figure out how to teach myself about that right now.
Yeah.
For a good chunk of the last decade, I was kind of the guy who's like, hey, how can I keep everything off of the cloud and keep all the data to myself? I don't want Zuckerberg knowing this about me. I don't want Google knowing this about me. Like, how can I keep everything on my own hard drive and keep as little information about me on the cloud? And with kind of this advent of AI, I feel like that's been softened because it's actually, if they have this information, it makes all this stuff so much easier, you know? But I think there are a ton of security implications to that and societal implications to that, especially, I mean, this feels like 100 years ago now, but when thinking about the Cambridge Analytica stuff, when thinking about the way that with data, elections can be steered and society can be steered. And I think like all that is still applicable, even though I don't hear as many people talking about it these days. And so, yeah, everything else that I'll say is with that pretense of, hey, data security and data sovereignty is quite important. But that being said, man, if you can figure out ways to have these tools interface with your data in a helpful way, there's some super cool stuff that can happen with that. I've been exploring the possibility of having all my emails and all my text messages and even my calls be put into a vector database so that if I had an AI agent and I wanted to say, hey, who in the last month have I talked with about good coffee? Then it can be like, hey, you were on this call with Daniel, and also you had this email and also this WhatsApp message. And that feels relatively simple. Really good semantic search is not a big deal. But if I wanted to then say, cool, I'm actually putting together this meeting of coffee nerds. Can you email an invite to each of them and also double check to make sure that they haven't told me that there's something that they're busy with that day? Figure out what day would be the best. That's a possibility, and it can just go and do it. Where there's a few parts of it where it's not quite there, but it's pretty close, and it's going to get closer and closer as time goes on. And so I think data management is kingdom stewardship, if in certain contexts. For kingdom-focused people and organizations to be able to steward their data well has potentially quite significant kingdom implications, especially when we think about applying these tools to it properly. And so, yeah, I think there is, for people and organizations that can get their data set up in really good and solid ways, I think the sky is becoming the limit of what the applications of that can be. But that is a long journey to be able to do that well. It's not a simple thing. And when you bring the data sovereignty, privacy stuff into it, it gets even more complicated. So, yeah.
The foundation for what can I do with my data sounds like it should be, how should I manage my data? And in the case of Waha, maybe the data that you gather could actually put someone at risk if you don't do it well. So
Yeah.
how have you struck that balance at Waha? And you've mentioned doing things offline versus using a service that may or may not scrape the data. So could you share how that has worked at Waha?
Yeah. So, I mean, our way of approaching it so far has been, we can't leak anything if we don't have it. So there's ways to gather tons and tons of information, but like thus far, our thing has been, hey, if we, like, because we have this responsibility to steward like people's privacy, especially in dangerous contexts, let's just not keep data that can be problematic like that, you know? So automation wise, we don't have stuff that could be acted upon in that way. But then there are times where it's like, we get on a call with someone that has crazy stories from crazy places in the world. And then in those cases, it's okay, well, stewarding this looks different because it's not the organizational side of stuff. And so usually that's, hey, keep this in a safe place and then derive stuff from it. Maybe we'll tell a story from this call, but we'll make sure that we anonymize everything and we're not actually putting that call anywhere.
Thinking about call recordings and transcripts and things like that too then.
Yeah. And that's something we're still figuring out and navigating. I feel like everyone has a AI note taker now, and like the wider implications of that, we probably haven't really even seen yet. We've gotten a call at one point. I think there was 3 people on the call and 5 AI note takers. So yeah.
Yeah, I think
there's definitely complexities there.
It says something about the ratios. It says something about the meeting if the ratio is weighted towards AI note takers.
The problem is when one person brings two or three. That's when it gets messy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, does Waha as an organization have a policy on what you can do, like with AI note takers or other ways of managing data? Or is it more of a everybody is smart with their own?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so. I personally have been like trying to that like we've been equipping our team with some of those trainings and some of those resources internally. I don't think we currently have any specific deep policies about that beyond just training of team members and that kind of thing. And the truth be told, a lot of this stuff is still new enough that we're still figuring it out, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, data privacy and sovereignty goes back to, Richard Stallman and the ancients of the tech space. But yeah, kind of figuring out how to interface with these ultra productive tools, and also data security is still something that I feel is still quite novel, So we don't have it in policies as maybe as much as we could or should yet. But yeah. It is something we try and make trainings available for within our team to do that well.
And what's something that you've done offline, like with your own hosted LLMs, because it was something that needed to be private?
Ooh. So one example that comes to mind, this isn't LLM specific, but it is AI specific. I have Whisper installed on my server, speech to text engine, and there's a decent number of times we have sensitive interviews that come through. And so in those situations, being able to get a transcript from a private Whisper that I know isn't being leaked to some cloud or data broker out there, that's probably the most iconic instance that comes to mind. Is there any other? I mean, this is not necessarily like a kingdom implication, but there's sometimes where like I have sketchy written code and I've hard coded an API key into the code. I'm like, I don't want to clean this up right now. I don't want to do environment management and stuff. So I'm just going to throw it to an LLM that I know I have control over, and that's not going to get leaked. And that's okay. So I think there's, I don't know, a vigilance about where data is going is something I try and keep in mind. And then if it's okay, it wouldn't be great if this got leaked, then it's okay. Let's throw it to something local instead of throwing it up to Google or some others.
Yeah, no, that's a good principle.
The truth is, there is some providers that are quite solid in their data security, and then there's some that are extremely not. So
yeah, have to be a little bit careful out there.
Totally.
And feels like it would not be a stretch to say that you're optimistic about AI and what it can do.
Oh no,
what it can do for us, and even what it can do for the church. Why is that?
Yeah, do I feel like an optimist about AI? That's such a complicated question, because there's a big bowl of pessimism in me about that, especially like thinking about I mean, not to get too deep into it, but like when we can now automate a lot of the low wage labor, what happens to those people who were in those jobs before, For us as a nonprofit, it's great because it means that like we steward every donation better than we could have otherwise by a lot. But thinking about minimum wage jobs and thinking about, the fact that every week that goes by, computer gets better and better at doing those jobs. There's some societal stuff that we're going to have to figure out and navigate. And that's intense and complicated for sure. I do think like the church has a lot of amazing opportunity to be stewarded with that. From that conference that I was at in Dallas, there was one group sharing about that they're working with Bible translators in some of the least reached, least engaged parts of the world. And what they were able to do is once a New Testament was completed, they were able to train an AI on that New Testament to like basically be a translation model to make new translations into that language that in many cases has no representation in any data set that any of these LLMs have been trained on. But they're able to make these like custom translation models. And they estimated that it would, for doing the Old Testament, it decreased the amount of time it would take to ship an Old Testament by 80%.
Wow.
Yeah. So something that would have taken 10 years before would just take 2, right? And that tooling is getting better every month, every week kind of thing. I just saw a post from one of those guys, and they were able to basically emulate that same efficacy in a fine tune of Qwen 0.6b, which is something that can run on like $100 cell phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tiny.
Yeah. And they're like, hey, with this new architecture, we were able to do better than our models before that were custom built for this by fine tuning one of the smallest LLMs possible. And that's something that works on someone's phone afterwards, right? And that efficacy turning into, hey, all you need to have an AI that can help you decrease the amount of time to ship an Old Testament by 80% is a $100 cell phone. The opportunity there is like unimaginable. But yeah, I do hold it in balance for sure. I think there is a space where, hey, when you increase the capacity for productivity, it doesn't necessarily need to mean displacement of a workforce. It can mean like changing of a workforce. I loved coding since I was, 13. Like this, like I love that space. I write very little code now, but I make things with code a ton because of these tools, and like at a faster rate than I ever could have before. And I think there's a space where as people start to have access to, as people start to not need to do specific things that AI gets better at, we can focus on things that are more important, and we can focus on things that like actually push the needle forward, either in like our own well-being, our family's well-being, our communities, the world, creation. So I seesaw rapidly back and forth between optimism and pessimism, but probably do hang a little bit more in the optimism department, especially like in ways it's been able to benefit like myself, my work, even our family. My wife and I built like a nutrition management agent that is connected to a Telegram bot. Call it Arnold, and it has like an AI generated version of Arnold Schwarzenegger on it. Arnold, the nutrition tracker bot. And now we just like, when we have a meal, we take a picture of it, pass it up to Arnold. He like figures out what the macros and like caloric density of the food is, files it in a spreadsheet. And then like whenever we want, we can just see what our macros have been over the course of the last few days, the last like week or whatever, And I don't think either with any of the apps that already existed, they often seem like, okay, I'm going to type in everything. It's like time consuming. With this, I just take a picture, like O3 figures out exactly what was in this meal and then files everything in a spreadsheet, So I think that's a huge life improvement. And I think there's a lot of life improvements we're going to find as time goes on. But there's also societal upheaval happening.
Yeah,
so,
we live in a tumultuous time.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at time here. So
Yeah,
thank you, Josh. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And if
Yeah.
people want to stay in contact with you and follow along, how can they do that?
Yeah, my main online identity is on my website, my blog, joshmuller.ca. And then from there, other things can be found. I'm starting to put out some content on YouTube. And so like links for YouTube and stuff can be found there. And I cross-post to various social platforms as well. So all my blog posts go up on Twitter and Blue Sky and Mastodon, etc. So yeah, joshmuller.ca is the main place. And then that branches into wherever else you want to chat with me.
Perfect.
I made this podcast because I want to be the person at the city gate to talk to every person coming in and out, doing great things with AI and find out what and why, and then share the learnings with everyone else. It would mean a lot if you could share the episode with someone that you think would like it. And if you know someone who would be a great person for me to talk to, let me know. Please reach out to me at Daniel Maneri on LinkedIn, or shoot an email to daniel@maneri.house, which is Daniel@MANARY.HAUS. Thanks for listening.